Hey Shat crew, King B here. I wanted to check in real quick and just address something that took place on our I'm Gonna Get You Sucka podcast. It was brought to my attention after the fact, and not in a negative way, that I had said some things about Mr. T that I want to address here today. Now, I made some statements that have probably a negative connotation about the career of Mr. T. I said some things that might have some, forgive me, I don't know what I'm talking about here, some Uncle Tom implications. And I want to just make things right and explain that I do not feel that that is the case. I feel that Mr. T, possibly viewing his very villainous role in Rocky III, felt compelled to show another side of himself in his television roles, to show that, you know, the big, gruff black guy doesn't have to be a villain, that he has a softer side, a caring side. And I think that maybe he was doing that because, you know, he understood how people can be portrayed in the media and needs to show that he is more than just one thing. In my troubled youth, I always viewed Mr. T very much as a safe adult, as a caring adult. This is going to sound silly, but Mr. T was in my corner just as much as Mr. Rogers, and I think they are both national treasures. So, just to clarify, Mr. T, great big fan, a wonderful guy, and wherever he is today, I hope he's doing great. Thank you.
Remember when we first met John McClane? Argyle picked him up from the plane and took him down the Nakatomi Tower at the Christmas party. And the terrorists were overzealous, but it was sweet when they killed Ellis. And with a little help from Alan, John McClane kicked ass.
Welcome back to Shat The Movies, the podcast where we answer the question, were the movies we loved when we were growing up really that good? Have you ever caught yourself thinking, why don't they make movies like they used to? Can you still remember spending your Friday night searching for the perfect movie rental at Blockbuster Video? Do you know what Blockbuster Video is? If you answered yes, and this is the podcast for you, I am one of your hosts, Gene Lyons, and alongside me are my co-hosts, Big D, Dick Ebert.
Good evening.
And coming to us straight from the Salt River, the King B.
My feet hurt.
Each week, we take a look back in time, decide if our favorite films still hold up. The movies we cover are chosen by you, the listeners, who generously commission the films you love. If you'd like to see all the movies we have covered, will cover, or want to choose one for yourself, please visit shatpod.com and have a look. At the end of each podcast, we'll provide you, the audience, with the number of wipes each movie would take to get off your respective butts. So thank you so much for listening. If you have not already, hit that subscribe button and share with a friend. It's how we help the podcast grow. Additionally, subscribe to our sister podcast, Shat on TV, where we review TV series such as Taboo, American Gods, Game of Thrones, True Detective, Lovecraft Country, Watchmen, and we are currently doing Westworld Season 4. Find all the information and past episodes at shatpod.com/TV. And finally, to hang up this live all week long, follow and subscribe to our Twitch channel, shatpod.com/Twitch, where we play video games, host watch parties, and edit this podcast live. All that being said, Big D, what movie are we reviewing tonight?
Gene, before we get to the movie, this is the first time that King B and I have been together in quite a long time. So there's been a couple times where people say, I can't tell you apart. So let's just try right now. Let's calibrate it, people. Hello, my name is Dick Ebert.
Hello, my name is Dick Ebert.
No, come on. Now you're going to confuse people.
No, come on. Now you're going to confuse people.
You're fucked. This is why you're not coming back again.
I'm in the fucking room and I'm confused.
Well, Gene, this week's commission comes from one of our Mount Rushmore Shat supporters. She's been with us through thick and thin. She's been with us through pandemics. She's wonderful. It is Black Girl Couch. And she said, I want you to go back to 1988 and review the blaxploitation parody film, I'm Gonna Get You Sucka.
And Black Girl Couch, aside from being a podcaster and a big supporter of us early on in Twitch, is just a great friend of the pod and a great person to follow on Twitter. And if you're not already following Black Girl Couch, definitely check her out on Apple Podcasts. She actually has a 4.9 star rating, which beats our 4.5 stars.
Yep.
Wow. But she writes it says, this was the first movie my mother allowed us kids to watch that had cursing, as she needed to share the hilarious experience. I've been quoting it for 2 decades. It also gave my mother the idea of having us choose which whooping we were going to receive, the switch or the belt. FYI, always the belt. Yes. Cheers, and can't wait for review, Black Girl Couch.
The worst part of the switch is having to choose the branch. You go too thin, it's going to be painful. You go too thick, they might make you go back and get another one. So bad. Stay with the belt.
Yeah, but if they lose sight of that buckle end and it comes around and claps you on the ass, that's all she wrote. You switchers, you don't know what you're talking about.
My mother actually had a rug beater. She used it on me a couple times. It was like a wicker, and it was like in the shape of like a clover at the end. She got me with it once. There was one time she really got into me. After that, all she had to do was pull it out. It was like Excalibur, like a mystical weapon. I saw it, and I immediately like took a knee.
My mom put pepper in my mouth. I'm Gonna Get You Sucka is a 1988 blaxploitation parody written and starring Keenen Ivory Wayans in his directorial debut. It includes loads of blaxploitation stars, including Jim Brown, Bernie Casey, Antonio Fargus, and Isaac Hayes, alongside Kadeem Hardison, Janae Dubois, John Witherspoon, Damon Wayans, Clarence Williams III, and Chris Rock. I'm Gonna Get You Sucka also is the film debut of comedian Robin Harris, who appears as a bartender. The film was written and directed by first-time director Keenen Ivory Wayans, who spent years watching blaxploitation films and making fun of them with his friends. Before making I'm Gonna Get You Sucka, Wayans spent 5 years earning credentials for films such as Hollywood Shuffle and Eddie Murphy Raw. And it was Eddie Murphy who suggested the concept of a blaxploitation parody and the title of the movie. Wayans filmed his debut feature film in 32 days and grossed a total of $3 million in the box office in the first month of the movie's release. Critically, the film opened with rave responses from the Black community. In her analysis of the film, Harriet Margolis writes that this is not because Jack consciously chooses to reject his mother's values, as that he wants to establish his own based on the macho heroic vibes he learned during the heyday of blaxploitation films. Critics of the film argue that the film not only failed at producing humor in its use of Black stereotypes, but generally was not funny. There was also a concern about the perception of the film by the white movie-going audience, because the film's villain, Mr. Big, is not only a white man, but a white man responsible for the deterioration of an inner-city Black community.
You know, the Harriet Margolis quote is really interesting when she talks about the character Jack rejecting his mother's values, et cetera, et cetera. Let's fanfic here for a minute.
Okay.
Do you think blaxploitation films existed in the universe in which this movie exists? He doesn't respect these people, or he doesn't stand in awe of them because of blaxploitation films. It's because they were the real life heroes of the street. This is their John Adams and George Washington.
He's the Black Ryan Reynolds.
I want my 2 hours back.
We always ask what your memories are of the movie. Tonight it is I'm Gonna Get You Sucka. Big D, we'll start with you.
This is probably the first time I can really remember watching I'm Gonna Get You Sucka. You know, but if you ask me honestly, to come up with any of the Living Color cast's movies outside of the actor Jim Carrey, I probably could not tell you any of them. Major Pain, yeah, I remember. Last Boy Scout, I remember. Blank Man, never saw it. Hollywood Shuffle, I think. But you mentioned this was the debut of Keenen Ivory Wayans as a director. This was also the pinnacle of his career as a director. After this, Scary Movie, probably a bigger hit, but less original and less acclaimed. Then White Chicks, and then Little Man. So he peaked early. And this was the first time I saw this one.
Didn't White Chicks get a sequel?
What would it be called?
More White Chicks? I don't know.
More White Chicks?
I'd fucking go see that.
I don't think they got a sequel. I really don't.
Big D, I first saw I'm Gonna Get You Sucka while I was visiting my cousins in Orange County. In fact, the cousin whose wedding I'm going to. These guys had HBO and Showtime and Cinemax at their house when my family didn't have cable at all. So every time we'd go there, I'd get very, very excited to visit them. The whole family would go to sleep, and I would just stay up all night watching anything that looked like it might have boobs or blood. And I remember I thought this one had Mr. T in it because I saw Black people, and I thought, it's got to have Mr. T. I watched it. It made zero sense to me because I didn't understand Black people or what a parody was.
Where was Mr. T during this filming, I wonder? Do you think Mr. T, because he always held himself to like a higher moral standard, would have felt that he was above this sort of film?
Wasn't he in Rocky 3?
Yeah.
That was where Mr. T started.
Okay, that was
but
like 82.
quickly flipped like the whole bad guy image to like sitting on Nancy Reagan's lap and saying, "Hey kids, be good to your mother." Like that guy didn't play the villain very long at all.
He was like the Black Ryan Reynolds.
Man, you really want there to be a Black Ryan Reynolds.
How about you, King B? What are your memories of this movie?
You know, I actually probably watched this most recently, probably within the last couple of years. During the COVID shutdown, I spent a lot of time just laying on the couch going through like, oh, I wonder what movie was made in 1972. And then watching 2 or 3 of those. And when that was done, I wonder what was made in 1973. And the title, I'm Gonna Get You Sucka, has always just rattled around in my head as something really unique. I thought it took balls to title a new movie something so kind of like brash, and I don't want to say lowbrow, but definitely indicative of what you were going to see. So I'd always known the film existed and finally got around to watching it just on the couch, killing time.
Well, just to answer the Mr. T question, no, he was not above this. He was busy doing a series of children's show called Goldie. And then also he did a little bit part on Blossom.
He was making sitcoms for white folk.
And remember, this is Dick Ebert. That is King B.
Never has a film moved so many and touched so deeply. United Artists is proud to present I Am Going to Get You Sucker, a captivating story.
Yo, baby, hold it. That ain't it. It's I'm Gonna Get You Sucker. Yes. And it's the story of the brothers' fight. Yes. Against Mr. Big. Yes. Well.
Let's get that sucker.
Push. It's about action, bravery.
I'm a soldier, man. I've been trained for combat.
Romance.
12 inches.
And danger.
If y'all step on my bunny, I'll kill both of you.
I'm gonna get you, sucker.
Let's get that sucker.
It's the good guys against the bad guys.
Oh, how come their guns are so much bigger than ours?
It's a balance thing. I don't know.
Good girls against the bad guys.
You must got the devil in you.
No. And it's bad guys against the bad guys.
Now, you boys can leave either through the window or the stairs.
We gonna take the stairs. Yeah, we'll take the stairs.
I'm gonna get you, sucker.
You know what I mean, brother?
Well, actually, I don't. You know, I didn't grow up around blacks. Now, I grew up in the suburbs. My dad was a lawyer, my mom was a doctor, and all my friends were white. Chump.
I'm gonna get you, sucker.
No.
It's got passion, pumps, rhythm, and soul.
Preach, brother!
Who are these guys? It's my theme music. Every good hero should have some.
I'm gonna get you sucker.
Don't say that.
I'm gonna get you, sucker. Even if you can't say it, you got to see it.
I got you, sucker.
Jack Spade, played by Keenan Ivory Wayans, returns home from a hitch in the army to find his brother Junebug has died from an overdose of gold chains, leaving Junebug's widow, Cheryl, and his mother, Ma Belle, played by Janae Dubois, alone to fend for themselves. When 2 of evil white guy Mr. Biggs' henchmen, Leonard and Willie, played by Damon Wayans and Kadeem Hardison, come to collect the $5,000 Junebug owed for his gold chain addiction, Ma wards them off and throws them down a flight of stairs.
First of all, the whole premise of OGing, too many gold chains, and the fact that they completely ignore or never even care to bring up the fact that like a drug epidemic systemically destroyed African-American communities, like in the time frame of this movie was supposed to be set, really bold. The fact that they don't even bring it up, that they focus on just the silliest stand-in for this drug epidemic. I never will get over that joke. Too many gold chains.
But they do mention it. They're like, oh, was he doing drugs? What was he running with the wrong crowd? They're like, no, he overgolded. So it's worse than doing drugs.
Drugs aren't an issue in this community. It's those damn gold chains.
Usually I'm turned off when a movie keeps going back to running gag because the gold chain thing keeps coming up again and again and again. But somehow Junebug's gold chain addiction, it just gets funnier every time. Like you said, King B, the dude's whole body, when we see it, it's just covered in ridiculous chains. We get to see photos of it over and over and over again. And I love that everyone who sees a photo of Junebug, no matter how serious the situation, no matter how dramatic the dialogue, always asks, how do you go to the bathroom with all that shit on?
He looks like a fucking mummy. I do want to take a minute to just recognize like the cycle of reinvention in like African American style in the culture. This movie shows us like within a decade of all the source material that they're satirizing, that this film is way ahead of its time in concept. They built an entire genre and analyzed it, boiled it down to its most basic premises, and goofed on every one of them just masterfully.
Yeah, if you think about it, people might say, oh, well, like parodies are nothing new, right? So around the same time you had, Naked Gun came out, Spaceballs was a year before this. It's not that they invented the parody. That's nothing new. But there's a big difference between Spaceballs, which parodies a specific film series and something very familiar, right? It's like space opera, sci-fi, fantasy movies. Those have been out for a very long time. You have a lot of source material to work with. I'm Gonna Get You Sucka. It parodies a film genre that's more cult than classic. It's not a mainstream film genre. And like you said, King B, it's only been around for like 10 years, but they boiled it down to its essence, found what was funny about it, and flipped it around to the point that if you weren't intimately familiar with the blaxploitation film, the movie in itself is kind of its own inside joke. It's really well done.
But what really struck me was how there was no missed beats. We'll compare this to another parody film, The Naked Gun, which we reviewed. That was a 1988 film. Even though we gave it high reviews, there's highs and lows, and it meanders around. You get jokes that aren't really, they're just kind of there. Nice beaver. We laugh at it, but you're like, oh, okay.
You laugh at it.
I still laugh at it. Oh, nice beaver. But this movie hits on all the jokes. There's very few missed beats, and just like in The Naked Gun, it moves on. If you don't like the joke, boom, here's another. And one of the things that this movie does, it is filled with legendary blaxploitation leading men. You got the biggest actors, the biggest stars, the biggest legends. And who is the badass of the film? It's Ma Bell. The movie is the first I remember to give respect to mamas everywhere. That is a universal theme. Yes, in the African-American culture, you don't fuck with mama. You just don't do it. And she even says it. When Willie and Leonard come into the apartment and they start kind of roughing them up, they're slapping them around, she puts them in their place quick. She slaps the shit out of them. She makes them pick up the pillows. She makes them clean up the apartment, then apologize, and then throws their asses down the stairs. And I got to tell you, I love that mama finally gets the props she deserves.
Janae Dubois, who you might recognize from Good Times, she's terrific as Ma Bell. And I love that they take the additional step, as it is a parody, of not bothering to try to make her martial arts look believable. Looking at you, robot jocks. They straight up pull a page from Spaceballs. They have like a mustache dude burst in as the stunt double. She's doing flips and shit. It's fucking hilarious. And while Janae Dubois was fantastic, there was one actor in this movie that I could have done without, and that's Kadeem Hardison. So I grew up on The Cosby Show, and later I watched, I think, every episode of A Different World. Like, that was just on. We all watched it as kids. I was excited to see Kadeem Hardison in this movie. He was that cool yet conscious character, Dwayne Wayne, who triggered the unfortunate craze of wearing flip-up sunglasses. If you never watched Different World, you definitely recognize this guy. Anyway, I couldn't be more disappointed in his performance, which seemed to consist of just acting dumber than Damon Wayans and just repeating everything that Wayans said.
I always hated the bits with Damon Wayans and Kadeem. I felt that they were ad-libbed and they weren't especially funny. I'm not a fan of Damon Wayans. I just don't think he's that great. He adds a lot of frenzy and this sort of frantic, what the fuck? And it just never really works for me. Yeah, it's funny to see them fall down the stairs, but Damon Wayans' bit that he's been doing the entirety of his career has always just fallen flat with me.
Yeah, he's always doing that thing where he's talking like that and sniffling. He just does one character all the time.
But so, Gene, admittedly, I'm not a big connoisseur of The Cosby Show or A Different World, so I didn't watch either of those. But my limited experience with Kadeem Hardison was White Man Can't Jump. What does he play in that film? The wisecracking sidekick who just parrots every shit-talking comedy, joke, whatever, that is his main. There we have Wesley Snipes. Here it is Damon Wayans, is he different in, a different world? Is that what he does there too?
Yeah, he's like a studious, nice kid. Like he's like a good student in college.
No, but that was TV. This is the film version of Kadeem.
This is the blaxploitation metaverse.
Yes, it is.
Well, Jack reunites with his mother and sister-in-law, who turns out to be an old flame, and he discovers the truth behind Junebug's death. Looking through old photos, he discovers his mother once had a romance with crime fighter John Slade, played by Bernie Casey, and he sets out to ask Slade to help him take down Mr. Big. Thanks to Ma, Jack survives an attack at the diner where Cheryl works, and he later recruits Slade at the first annual youth gang competition. Jack also attempts to recruit Kalinga, who once led the defunct People's Revolutionary Army, only to discover he has a white wife, played by Eve Plum, and no soldiers.
I think Big D mentioned this is a literal wish list of black entertainer heroes. Bernie Casey as John Slade is a retired football player turned actor. We got Jim Brown, who most people are going to remember from his role in Mars Attacks. Jim Brown plays Slammer, also another retired football player. Jim Brown became a super prolific genre master, not only in blaxploitation films, but he was also regularly cast in tons of Western and war movies. Isaac Hayes, obviously the singer-songwriter, later South Park voice actor. He was responsible for the Shaft theme. Steve James, who played Kung Fu Joe, he was a stuntman and actor in a ton of Kung Fu movies. He is in all the American Ninja movies, tons of Chuck Norris films. Antonio Fargus is Fly Guy, my personal favorite character in the movie. He's a veteran actor and a blaxploitation mainstay. He is most widely known as playing Huggy Bear on the old Starsky and Hutch series, but had a ton of television appearances all throughout that time period. Also, we do want to give a very special shout out to Clarence Williams, who played Kalinga. Clarence Williams did a ton of TV performances, originally most notably known as the undercover cop in the Mod Squad. The last role I saw him in, he had a very brief and fun role in an episode of Justified, passed away just 2 days ago. So rest in peace there, Clarence Williams III.
Not only is the casting on this spot on, it's also got balls, because when you think about it, most of the time, if you're doing a parody, you cast any actor to make fun of something that isn't that actor. Here, they got the guys making fun of themselves, basically, right? And the movie even calls out the homogenized nature of black action heroes of the 70s. Like, Jack is asked what makes him think he could be a hero, and he's like, the next football player. And they're all like, oh yeah, that makes sense, because we fucking all are too. That's what it takes, to be one. But when you think about it, like Kung Fu Joe, again, Steve James, like he's making fun of the role that he gets in movies. And you didn't need to have seen all these movies to understand those archetypes, right? You get the Kung Fu guy, you get the pimp, you understand those archetypes, you recognize the faces. It all comes together without you having to have an intimate knowledge of the source material.
No, and I think the cast shows you two things. One, they were all having fun. Everybody, you can tell, was on set enjoying it. And two, the credibility that Keenen Ivory Wayans has to get somebody like Isaac Hayes or Jim Brown. That is a defining role for these actors. To get them to do something that parodies it, you have to have total faith. It's okay to make jokes, it seems to be, when you are a member of a race. I can make fun of white guys, pretty much, I think. I have free reign to make white men can't jump or white men can't dance jokes. It's okay if you're within that race.
Ooh, edgy.
No, what I'm saying is I'm Gonna Get You Sucker was a movie made by African Americans for African Americans, and they satirized their own race, the community, the stereotypes, but not once did they stray outside that. They could have easily gone into some low-hanging jokes about white people, nerdy white people, like Square, or about the Asian members of the community. It could have easily gone that way, but not once. I mean, I think the closest they come to it is the David Allen Greer, the white, quote unquote reporter who's from the suburbs, whose parents were like a lawyer and a doctor. Other than that, it pretty much stays on point, and I think it earns points for me.
Yeah, and this is why not only does representation matter, but creative representation matters, right? Leave black comedy to black comedians. Great example of that, the first annual youth gang competition. This scene illustrates exactly why a joke that doesn't work in National Lampoon's Vacation works and I'm Gonna Get You Sucka. Because instead of being a cautionary tale like Chevy Chase did of, oh, don't go in that neighborhood even for 3 seconds or you have the wheels stolen right off your car while you're in it. Instead, you got Bernie Casey being like, oh, we wanted to give youth events that match their environment. And I'm far more entertained laughing at a dude running with a TV while Dobermans are chasing him if I know that this is a self-reflective notion, not somebody from the outside making fun of a race.
Dude, but I love the seriousness that this is shot with and the athletic effort that the participants give. In The Naked Gun, we said, the measure of whether a parody works is how the straight man performs. These teams out there, I found myself wanting to watch it. I wish it was real. The team stripping the car event, that belongs on ESPN 8 with like flipping cups and like they even do an electricians national championship. If you guys have never seen it, they get teams from each of the major like electrician companies out there where they will get a stud framed house matching and they have to run it to code. And they time it, they score it.
For all the electricians out there, shatpod.com, go straight to the speak pipe feature, leave Big D a voicemail about what you call a group of electricians.
You call them a union.
Well, Jack and Slade survive an ambush by Leonard and Willie, letting the two henchmen live to tell Mr. Big he has 24 hours to leave town. The two heroes visit Sam's lounge, where Jack is propositioned by a woman named Cherry and goes home with her until he discovers she's bald, wears colored contacts, and stuffs her clothing. When Jack returns to the lounge, One-Eyed Sam, played by Hawthorne James, supplies Jack and Slade with the dusty arsenal. Slade enlists the help of his old friends Hammer and Slammer, who now operate a rib joint, and Kung Fu Joe rounds out the team. Slade also forms an alliance with former Pimp of the Year Fly Guy to gather intel on Mr. Big's operation.
So one of the running jokes throughout the movie is Spade being from the military. Everyone expects him to be a badass. He's walking around with all of his medals and his patches on his jacket. And people assume, hey, you're a killer. You've been trained for this. And I was so happy to see, because a running joke in the military and what's kind of widely known is that if people talk a big game, I immediately red flags go up. I'm thinking either stolen valor or it's somebody who's overhyping what they've done. Because the people who've actually really been through shit never talk about it. That's not something you brag about. You keep that quiet, like Ash's father. He doesn't talk about that shit. It's just something that went on. So when we get Sam and Jack, and Sam is saying, hey, what'd you do? And he goes, I was a secretary. And you think he's going to look down on that? And they both like, yeah, I did too. Hey, I got the shorthand patch and the surfing patch. And Sam reveals that he lost an eye, but was shooting it with a paper clip. It was great to see that joke carried throughout the military experience. And I really love seeing it in there.
I've talked before on the podcast about friends of mine who have had like the most non-military military jobs you can imagine. And I mentioned the one that worked at the rec center, just checking out fitness equipment their entire time in the Air Force. I had another friend who just sat in a van on the airstrip and just downloaded images off of reconnaissance aircraft. And that's what they did day in and day out. Was never even exposed to any sort of a dangerous situation. And I have all the respect in the world for the jobs that they did, but I wouldn't call them like war heroes, right? And recently, Lindsey Graham, I don't know if you guys heard about this.
Yes.
He proposed to keep kids safe after the Uvalde shooting, that we mobilize veterans to keep the school safe. And I'm just imagining like Big D, like, don't you guys have jobs? Didn't you move on after the military to like do other stuff? Or do you guys just roam around the countryside, looking to solve problems?
No, he was looking for retired. He wants the old people. That's the last, like, I don't want like some sleepy old dude sitting at the school with his AR going to nod out. That's not who's going to be like an immediate responder to be able to take down some kid who's been tactically training on Call of Duty for 10 years. But on a side note, did you ever shoot those paper clips with a rubber band? Those are deadly. I remember my grade school teacher telling us we would shoot our eyes out. Those things are deadly, and I would not want to get hit with one of those.
I never got hit with one of those, but we did have those rubber band guns. Them shits would fuck you up, especially like the repeaters that were like the 6-shot ones. Not great.
No.
We just hit each other.
My mom put pepper in my mouth. So at One-Eyed Sam's lounge, we bring a little sexuality into the movie. We get to meet Cherry. Jack and Slade are basically sitting there. They're talking about love and lust. And, Jack is saying how he's waiting for like that special someone. And Slade's basically telling him he's got to get his dick wet. As soon as he mentions lust, boom, there's this woman. She's like licking her lips. She looks like she escaped some mix between a Prince video and like a Warrant video. And she wants Jack's 12 inches. She's coming on to him hard. But the joke quickly devolves when Jack gets to her apartment. She starts taking off her contacts, and then she takes off her tits and her wig, takes off her ass and her leg. And Big D, I couldn't help but think of your assertion in the early days of Shat that cosmetics and undergarments and implants amounted to women misleading men. I think you even said something to the point of like, it's basically lying. Do you still feel that way, or have we evolved?
No, it's 100% true. It's false advertisement. Any kind of physical augmentation is false advertising. It's misleading. If you are anyone who wears lifts to make yourself taller, expect your partner to be disappointed when they find out you're lying. If someone's wearing a wig, maybe they like a specific hair color. Ooh, that's lying. Contacts, lying. Fake boobs, lying. Stuffing the front of your pants, lying. Wearing a fake ass. It's all a lie. Don't be surprised the next morning when your partner's disappointed. You went to bed with someone and you woke up with somebody else. It's a lie.
Big D, did something happen to you?
No, it's a lie. Just don't pretend like, oh, the person didn't call me. Yeah, because you lied to him about it. It would be like somebody going to a bar in OR scrubs and not being a doctor. It's a lie. Expect them to be disappointed when they wake up and you're not a doctor.
What if you wear clothing that indicates you have more money than you actually have?
As long as you don't say it. If I dress nice, they might think, hey, he's got some nice clothes. Maybe he shops at Ross or, Marshall's, got some brand names for less. That could happen. But if I say I'm some big wig, I make great money, it's a lie.
What if I got lap band surgery to make myself instantly thinner?
I don't think it's instant, but you would be thinner. You're not wearing like male Spanx.
Yeah, but I didn't exercise. I still eat like a fat fuck.
That's fine. You're skinny. I don't care that you eat like a fat fuck. You're skinny.
Well, I'm definitely not skinny is the point. I would undergo a procedure and I would make myself appear much thinner.
No, but you would be thinner because you're bypassing part of your intestines. You're not digesting that caloric intake and your stomach is smaller. That's different than wearing Spanx and I come and undo you and you just spill out onto my chest.
What about those ladies on YouTube that are so good at makeup that they make their face look totally different, like the contouring and all that shit? I've seen some impressive shit.
I'd somewhat be more tolerable about that because that's an artistic representation.
What happens when three white guys in their 40s do a podcast together?
It's lying.
So is the Mona Lisa just a piece of canvas lying to you? It's just burlap. It's just basic rough burlap.
It's not a real woman.
I just love that Ash goes away for one episode and Gene's talking about getting his dick wet.
Well, I didn't talk about getting my dick wet.
You talked about Slade getting his dick wet or Spade.
What does that have to do with me?
You would never say those words with Ash around.
Oh, are you kidding?
Never. When you said dick wet, I went, oh my goodness. Mom is out of town and look what happens. The kids go wild.
Ash is going to be so offended by this. By your assertion.
You wouldn't say it.
Ash talks about titties and shit.
Dick getting wet's different.
Back to the movie.
So, I want to jump in here real quick. The Wayans are an incredibly prolific, established entertainment family. Mom, I think, was in the business. The sisters are in the business. All the brothers. There might even be a cousin. But after Keenan Ivory Wayans, I feel everyone else just sort of drifts on that guy's coattails. When watching this scene with Cherry, it makes me really think about something Gene once talked about when he gave a dead-on assessment of that Ted Lasso TV show. He said that the thing that made that show a quality show was that its performances and its writing were so earnest. And that is something that is just constantly echoed in my head, and it's been a thing that I've looked for in every other piece of entertainment art. In this scene, Keenan Ivory Wayans is so committed to the bit. He's bouncing up and down in his chair. He's got this childlike, just ecstatic grin. He's so silly, but never once does he stray or dip in intensity. The ad-libbing from his brother throughout the film, overly repetitive, too frantic to enjoy, but this guy is so committed to his bit. The guy has chops.
He's secretly the most talented. You wouldn't think of it. Like if you ask people to list the Wayans, he probably would be last that they list, but that's because he is behind the camera. He's the writer, director, producer. He is amazingly talented. And in this role, you're right, King B. That scene I love, where he is giddy, he's nervous, he's sitting there fumbling his words. And we talk about, again, Naked Gun. That movie worked for me because of Leslie Nielsen. Frank Drebin, he plays that straight character. And this is the only moment that Keenen Ivory Wayans diverts from that. And it was worth all the laughs. And this movie is so far ahead of its time. As it's going through, I'm realizing influences that it's had far down the road. We get to the Pimp of the Year contest, the pageant, okay? And immediately it pops in my head, Dave Chappelle's Player Hater Ball. That is this bit. Bitch Better Get My Money by Fly Guy. That song is amazing. I couldn't believe, as the movie went on, how I could see the influence these years later, and that I don't know the movie truly gets the respect it deserves for the influence it had across all entertainment.
It's simultaneously instantly classic and at the same time shocking. It's weird how it straddles that line, because on one hand, you've got like all the pimps in their swimsuits. You're like, am I really seeing this? Is this what's really happening? And at the same time, you know, as a kid in the 90s, I'm listening to Snoop Dogg, I'm listening to the Above the Rim soundtrack, and there's all these influences from Bitch Better Have My Money in there. Old Dirty Bastard. I mean, there's all these takes coming from I'm Gonna Get You Sucka. It's far more influential than I ever realized. And I understand that it picks up its own notion of pimps from previous movies. But the point being is that, again, this distilled version became its own thing. It took on a life of its own. And Big D, you mentioned The Naked Gun, and I don't think I'm Gonna Get You Sucka delivers laughs at the same rate as The Naked Gun. I mean, The Naked Gun is like a fucking comedy machine gun, but it's far less predictable in its humor, and it deserves applause for that. Case in point, when Jack and Slade are ambushed, there's this machine gun attack from the rooftop, and you're expecting to see Jack. He's like, oh, I'm a veteran. You know, I was in the Army. You expected to see him as soon as the bullets fly, because it is a comedy, because it's a parody. He's going to run around panicked, right? He's screaming and waving his arms around and flailing. You expect that. What you don't expect is the second part of the joke, because as he's running for cover and he's getting cover fire from Slade, he's running across his dead body and he squeezes a fart out of it. I got to tell you, an hour after watching this movie and right before I went to bed that night, I'm still laughing about the fart, and I never laugh at a fart joke.
Now, I'm surprised that you like the fart joke, but what earned me the most respect for this film was the scene leading up to that, where we get the guy proposing to his girlfriend on the step. He's gunned down, she's shot at, and he's laying there, and Slade says, is he dead? And the bride says, yeah, of course he is. Didn't you hear the music? When you get surprised, that's when I really enjoy a film.
Fart noise still funnier. Cheryl leaves her shift at the diner to deal with cramps and is intercepted by Leonard. She manages to fight him off with the power of her menstruation, but Willie knocks her out from behind. She's abducted and taken to Mr. Big's hideout. Meanwhile, Jack, Slade, Slammer, Hammer, and Kung Fu Joe raid Mr. Big's Big Brim bar, triggering a shootout with Jack's childhood enemies, the Evans family. In retaliation, Mr. Big uses corrupt cops to take out Kung Fu Joe. As the good guys gear up for an assault on Mr. Big's hideout, Hammer slips on a rifle round and accidentally sets off the various guns he has holstered all over his body. So I'm not going to sit here and say this movie is perfect. I'm Gonna Get You Sucka is imperfect. It is fairly low budget. It has its flaws, but it does one thing exceptionally well, which is comedic tactics. So when I was in theater classes at ASU, there was this acting exercise we did called tactics. And basically, I'd be asked to persuade another actor, an acting partner, into doing something. And I'd have to think of all the ways I could try to make that happen. By the way, King B just does this naturally to me every fucking day when we hang out. But you could try charming them. You could try bribing them. You could try intimidating them, seducing them, tricking them, appealing to their generosity, appealing to their ego, finding common ground. Anything you can. It was just to see how many different ways you could attack the same problem. I'm Gonna Get You Sucka does this with nearly every joke set up. Like every scene has this. A great example is Chris Rock. He's doing that bit that Chris Rock does. You know, he's asking for the cheaper versions of food. The good Lord, that's a lot of money, right? He's at the rib shop and he's asking for cheaper versions of food. And that might work for Big D. But I didn't laugh. Hammer threatening Chris Rock to put a foot up his ass. That might work for King B, but I didn't laugh. But when Hammer tells Chris Rock that the 15 cents he's offering for a sip of soda is worth less than the cup it would come in, Chris Rock countering with, fuck a cup, just pour some in my hands. That got me. It was the third attack, the hook in the combo that nailed me.
I agree. That was the one I got. I like that. I didn't enjoy the one rib. I guess you don't give me enough credit as I deserve.
50 cents a rib.
So I came around on fart jokes. I came around on Chris Rock. And after 5 years of doing this podcast, I am proud to announce that I finally laughed at a gag featuring little people.
Yes.
Early in the movie, Ma reveals that Jack used to come home crying to her every time he was in trouble. And even once when he was being chased by the Evans family. And Jack fires back, a family full of midgets isn't kids, it's a gang. And then they put that joke on the shelf for like an hour. You think it's gone, but it resurfaces during this big raid on the Big Brim bar when one of the Evans family is hiding in a giant hat on top of a dude's head and it starts a shootout. And then you realize the whole damn family is in there.
I'm surprised that this was the moment in the 5 years of this podcast. Big Hat made it okay to make fun of small people or little people.
Big hats are just naturally comedy gold. I'm going to tell you that giant hat dress code was such a goofy bit. I couldn't focus on the movie dialogue. I'm just marveling that as they pan across the bar, everyone's got their giant hat. The bartender's got a giant ball cap with a 2-foot long brim. Then that tiny arm pops out. It's all over for me. These guys are borrowing cartoon gags in a film a decade before Shaolin Soccer and Kung Fu Hustle perfected it. The callback to the midget joke is amazing.
And Big D, like you said, it's because they're not making fun of little people. Nowhere in here are they making fun of little people. It's not like they, like, even when Keenen Ivory Wayans goes to like tackle the dude from the Evans family, he full on fucking tackles him. There's no mercy here, you know. And so I think that's a real key part of it, is that they're acknowledging that little people exist. They're acknowledging that he was attacked by a gang of him. They're acknowledging that they're hiding in hats, which is a possibility, but it's not degrading to a little person. It's not midget wrestling.
It would be degrading if they were in regular size hats, but because they're big hats, it's okay.
Oh, I don't even want to go anywhere near your rationale. You're stuffing people into hats.
I'm only doing it because Ash isn't here. Jack, Slade, and Slammer arrive at the hideout to carry out the mission. Slade blows himself up, rappelling down the side of the hideout with lit explosives. Slammer insists on jumping through a window and is wounded in his giant bunion, and Jack uses his machine gun to take out several henchmen. Ma joins the fight with her shotgun until Jack locks her in a storage closet. He fights his way to the room where Cheryl is being held, but a hidden Leonard holds Jack at gunpoint. Fly Guy appears and turns the tables on Leonard, and Mr. Big shows up and turns the tables on Fly Guy. Finally, a toasty John Slade reveals he didn't die. He shoots Mr. Big and announces, "I got you, sucker."
That giant bunion bit was amazing. Gene doesn't like it. I remember we watched this film together. He goes, "Yeah, I didn't care for that."
Really?
I recognized Jim Brown complaining about his feet on a regular basis, and I was praying that there was some reason. I even started Googling on my phone if it was a football injury or something that he was known for. Couldn't come up with anything. It turns out it's all just this buildup to a ridiculous prop gag. That giant throbbing fake toe, I fucking howled. What a dumb, goofy joke. I'm all in.
I was impressed by the toe. The toe was some John Carpenter level shit. I mean, it looked like it came straight out of The Thing. And for a parody movie, it looked convincingly gross and juicy and throbby. I just didn't think the joke was that funny. First of all, they telegraphed it way too much. And second, again, it's like I said, they're hitting it at all angles. Not every joke is going to work, but they're throwing it out there, until one catches you. This one just didn't.
But I liked it. They were dedicated to it. They give us a long runway They mention it 3 or 4 times. His toe, it hurts. When it finally comes out, it is subverting my expectation of what a hero is. This whole team, it's supposed to be the indestructible. This is the elite squad. This is the expendable version of blaxploitation films. This is all of the heroes. It's the dream team. And nope, instead, they deconstruct that macho nature of those characters. Instead of badass, over-the-top guys who are going to get it done, they're incompetent fools who can't do anything. Hammer, he falls down because he's strapped on too many weapons. It goes off. He shoots himself. Did we get him? He comes up with. Or when Slade blows himself up, or Jack pulling out that splinter in that repair scene where he's got a needle and a pack of 7-Eleven matches. I think it's great because you expect them to go in and just solve the problem. And instead, they're all incompetent.
What's crazy to me is that in 1990, they greenlit this hour-long TV pilot called Hammer, Slammer, and Slade. And it was actually these guys. These guys had a show on ABC. It ran one episode. And let me take you back to 1990 just to give you the framework when this movie came out. So ABC's lineup at the time, Dinosaurs. Remember Dinosaurs?
Oh, yes.
Full House, Family Matters, Boy Meets World, Home Improvement. Like, these were the shows that were on. And somebody was like, hey, you know what would be great with all these? Fucking Hammer, Slammer, and Slade.
Now, at this time, there was also a show on called Sledgehammer, which I don't know if you recall.
Sledgehammer's badass.
The goofy cop show. I never watched Hammer, Slammer, and Slade. I don't know if it was meant to be a comedy or if it was meant to be a gritty crime detective show. But if it is a comedy, it's a perfect companion to something like Sledgehammer.
I mean, but Sledgehammer was like mid-'80s, though.
I don't think this is a comedy. Like, if I read the storyline here on IMDb, Hammer, a well-dressed, mannered young detective, finds out the hard way that everything he knows is a lie after his partner's suicide via soup. Okay, that was hot. Maybe it was a comedy.
Like a real drama.
Okay, maybe it was a comedy. But I mean, the poster looks like it's very dramatic. It looks serious. I mean, I don't know. I mean, when you go back and you look at the description of this film and you wonder who wrote it, this ultra-hit comedy in the tradition of the Naked Gun and Airplane stars Keenan Ivory Wayans in an action-adventure filled with screwball gags and side-splitting one-liners. So maybe it was a comedy. I don't know.
Guys, I don't know if this is a comedy. It says here, this man committed suicide by soup.
Soup was too hot.
Well, now is the time in the podcast where we give our wipe scores for I'm Gonna Get You Sucka. Our wipe scores are a way of telling you how many wipes this movie takes to get off your respective butts. 0 wipes is a perfect movie. It is walking out of prison in your finest attire, complete with your fishbowl platforms and your very own live theme music. And 5 wipes is an absolute disaster. It is dying of overgold, so covered in necklace you look like a fucking mummy and can't go to the bathroom. King B, we'll start with you. What is your wipe score for I'm Gonna Get You Sucka?
Well, as I'm looking at your guys' scores, I kind of start to feel a little bit guilty.
No.
I gave it 2.25 wipes. It's better than average. I feel that the silliness shows a clear inspiration from like maybe a latchkey cartoon-filled afternoon childhood, a love for blaxploitation. There's talent and pedigree going back for decades in this movie. But the production still feels a little too cheap and low budget. They could have used better dummies and props. They could have tightened up some of the ad-libbed bits. The laughs are unique and they stand on their own. It's fun, but I just wanted a little bit more of a polished product.
So that's 2.25 wipes from the King B. I'm going to go a little more generous than that. Is this movie more B movie than blockbuster movie? Yes. Is it as good as Spaceballs? I don't know about that, but it's definitely more original. I laughed out loud several times, mostly surprise laughs, and I had a really good time watching the movie. I should preface this by saying that we tend to give more lenient wipe scores when we've watched this movie together. I did watch this movie with the King B. I think you guys go back and listen to when Roger, Big D, and I did Cable Guy, right?
Yeah.
It just happens when you're in the same room with each other. You laugh more, right? So we did watch this together. So Please don't be shocked by my score. The cast was mostly solid, which makes sense considering they all come from different blaxploitation films. And I didn't feel like I needed to have seen those films to be entertained. For me, it's a little bit higher than the King Bee. I'm going in at 1.5 wipes.
Gene, I think that's a big point, what you said. I don't think you need to have been a fan of those films in order to enjoy this. Yes, this movie is special because of the timing, its influence, the genre that it was parodying. It's something that's unique, but I had a great time watching it. I think the timing, it's tighter. I think the plot moves along than The Naked Gun, which we gave a higher score. I think Bernie Casey and the rest of the cast, they're fantastic. I got to give it a 1.5 wipes. I wasn't expecting much, but this was an enjoyable watch. It was a breeze, and if you haven't seen it, go back. It's quite funny. So with a wipe score of 1.75, that now ties this in the 108 spot with Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom, Halloween 4, Drop Dead Gorgeous, and Friday. But, Gene, you have to also remember, we seem to give higher scores for comedies, where we give them much more leeway. We're forgiving. I mean, The Cable Guy is one of our top, I believe, 10 films still, and a lot of people don't respect that. So maybe as a podcast, we just gravitate towards comedy.
We just want to laugh. Did you give this a higher or lower score than you gave Friday?
I gave Friday 1.25 wipes. I think Friday was better.
All right.
Do you think Friday is funnier?
I'll be honest with you. The two of the films are close together. When we're talking about a wipe score of 0.25 difference, they're both good in different ways. I think you can put Friday on in the background and enjoy it, whereas this movie, you need to sit down and focus on it. Different films, but both better than I expected.
Would you say you have a hard time telling the two black films apart?
Brilliant.
Why would you even say something like that?
To make you squirm.
I don't squirm.
All right. Well, Black Girl Couch, I hope we did the movie justice, and I hope you're satisfied with the wipe score. And if you're not, write us a Yelp review. Big D, let's move on to voicemail.
Well, Gene, this week we're going to do one voicemail from one of our listeners, Dusty, who wanted to call in about a review of Blood In and Blood Out.
What's up, Shat Crew? This is Dusty from Texas. I'm excited about you guys doing Blood In, Blood Out. Down here in my neck of the woods, it is a big movie, especially in Chicano culture. It didn't do very well in the theaters, but upon home video release, and I believe it was a double cassette release, it has done wondrous. I remember many viewing parties when it first came out, and having to take breaks in between because it was just a long movie. Although it does have a long run time, it doesn't seem like it because the story just keeps building and building. And then the turns at the end, all the reveals, like they never get stale to me. The countless times I've seen the movie, it seems like every time I watch it, I'm still excited at the end when you hear all the reveals. So great movie. Love what you guys do. I'm excited to hear you guys either rip it to shreds or fall in love with it. I do recommend watching it more than once because you get more joy out of it once you kind of know what's going on. Again, you guys, thank you for everything. Vatos Locos forever, and we'll talk to you guys soon.
Yeah, Dusty brought up an interesting point, or at least caused me to think of an interesting point that I hadn't considered before. We mentioned how similar Blood In, Blood Out was to The Godfather in its structure and its ambition. The Godfather is one of those movies and series, frankly, that I can rewatch and pick up something new every time, right? You see things building upon rewatch that you didn't notice in the first watch. I do wonder if Blood In, Blood Out is like that. Big D, you as a person who's watched it 3 or 4 times, did you pick up things on rewatch that you didn't notice the first time around?
I mean, obviously, the first version I watched, the quality of it was so low, but I did have more respect for the quality of the film than I thought it originally was more low budget. And you could feel their aspirations. I just, again, feel like it was cheated. It deserved to be a 2-movie like series. It was packed in. I think it's a quality film. Somebody on Twitter asked if they should go and buy it. Yes, you can get it on Amazon for like $4. Buy a copy. It's a film that's worth watching. So that's it for voicemails this week, Gene. And next week, after a bad breakup, Charlie falls for lovely butcher Harriet and introduces her to his parents. But as voracious consumers of sensational tabloids, his parents soon come to suspect Harriet is actually a notorious serial killer, Mrs. X. Wanted in connection with a string of bizarre honeymoon killings, Thinking his parents foolish, Charlie proposes to Harriet, but while on their honeymoon with her, he begins to fear their right. Commissioned by Kiki E, released in 1993. And I don't think that I've seen this film before.
I think you're going to like it.
I hope you're right.
Well, thank you, Kiki, for your commission. Thank you, Black Girl Couch, for your commission. Thank you to all the commissioners who make this podcast possible. And thank you for the King Bee. That concludes this week's episode of Shat The Movies. Be sure to follow us on social media and share with a friend. We're on Facebook, Twitter, Snapchat, and Instagram at Shat The Movies. King Bee, where can they find you on social?
I've been banned from most all social medias. However, you can occasionally find pictures of nature that I take on Instagram at King Bee Adventure, KINGBEE Adventure. Look it up.
You can find us on Facebook, Twitter, Snapchat, and Instagram at Shat The Movies. Email us, host@shatthemovies.com. Support our podcast by shopping our Amazon affiliate link, buying our merch, or commissioning your own movie. Find all the information by visiting our website, shatpod.com. And thank you so much to Big D for collecting all those commissions and booking them out. How far out are we now, Big D? Were you looking at winter 2023?
No, I believe we're into August of 2023.
That's basically tomorrow.
So we're very lucky.
Also, check out our sister podcast, Shat on TV. We review TV series such as Lovecraft Country, True Detective, Taboo, American Gods, Game of Thrones, Watchmen, and Westworld, which is in season 4 as we speak. You can find all the information on our website, shatpod.com/TV, wherever fine podcasts can be found, including iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, and YouTube. Be sure to subscribe. And if you stop by iTunes, please leave a 5-star review. That helps the podcast grow. While you're at it, go to Black Girl Couch and check out her podcast as well. Leave a review there as well. On behalf of my co-hosts, King B and Big D, I'm Gene Lyons. Be sure to join us next week for the following movie.
Hi, my name is Mike Myers. Perhaps you recognize me from my recent motion picture, Wayne's World. Thanks. As you can see, I'm on the set of my new film in which I play a young fellow named Charlie, who gets a little more than he bargained for. For example, there's suspense. Have you heard of this case? Mrs. X. She murders her husband on her honeymoon, then she changes her identity and marries again.
I never heard of it, so what?
I think I'm dating Mrs. X.
The Justice Department reports an alarming rise in the number of poisoning murders across the United States.
It's a smart drink to improve your brain power. You like it, Charlie?
Thank you, no. There's action.
Charlie, there's something I've been meaning to tell you.
She's a killer.
Charlie, she is not a killer.
And of course, there's plenty of romance.
What do you look for in a girl you date?
I know everyone always says sense of humor, but I'd really have to go with breast size.
You're lying on your side, totally asleep. I could just stick a needle in you.
So, as you can see, it has all the elements of a truly great motion picture. Oh, did I mention the axe murder?
Hello, sweetheart.
Missed me, darling? Yeah.